Assalamualaikum. Boleh dengar saya ya?
Boleh.
Boleh.
Boleh ya? Okay, so nearly 9:40 already. Yeah. So nak mula ke?
Boleh.
Boleh, Prof.
Boleh je lah ya. Okay, so in any case, I think I will let in people when they come in lah ya. So kita mula ya. Eva, will it be alright?
Boleh, Prof.
Okay. Alright. Okay, so Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Let's begin our session with recitation of Al-Fatihah. Okay, so thank you for joining me. This morning, I suppose it's our last session lah ya. Habis dah selepas ni ya. So again, I hope today it's okay for me not to open my video ya. Nampak berat pula ya. I'm like kat rumah ni tak stable pula internet ya. I hope that's alright with you all. So as usual, I'm going to share my screen so that you can follow the learning. Yeah. Okay, boleh nampak ke screen saya?
Boleh.
Boleh.
Boleh ya? Alright, okay. So dah tengok ke ni? The PowerPoint dalam Padlet. Sempat tengok tak? Brothers, sisters, have you had a look at this?
Sempat.
Macam mana? Tak sempat lagi?
Sempat tengok go through sekali lah. Sekali imbas.
Alright. Okay, thank you. So meaning I'll take you through lah ya. So this has not so many slides as the other materials, I suppose, yeah, but still it's like the conclusion of what you have learned throughout the semester under toxicology. So mana tahu nanti when you graduate, so you choose a career, a profession, meaning as an assessor, yang buat risk assessment, okay. You are employed by companies ke, or you work for DOSH ke, environment ke, and you go and audit, audit facilities ke, so to do with health lah, and toxicity or perhaps toxic exposure, okay. So meaning the points in here, just to take you through what it involves, okay. So let's see. Yang ini, I think definitions ni nanti you just go through on your own lah ya, on your own. Okay. So I think masa pharmacology, I'm not sure. I cannot remember also whether we have talked about what it means by toxicity, or perhaps in the early sessions with me in the semester, kita ada tengok definitions of toxicity, hazard, yeah. So meaning to say, if you're talking about toxicity, it's the capacity of the chemical to produce harm or injury in any given conditions, yeah. So meaning kalau kita talk about toxicity, remember our previous in vivo lecture, macam let's say even our medications yang can be beneficial, our vitamins which can be beneficial, tapi we usually ada macam apa ni, kita kena be aware that at the same time that these medications ke chemicals yang kita guna hari-hari and then the vitamins, the supplements give us benefit. We must always be aware that at any point there can be toxicity. Boleh faham ke tak ni? Students, can you follow what I'm saying just now? Can you make sense of what I just mentioned? Boleh chat juga with me so that I can see. Can you understand what I'm trying to say? Anyone pun boleh.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So maknanya kan macam everyday life when you are using like let's say chemicals kan, or even the simple shampoo kan bahaya tak shampoo?
Bahaya.
Can be bahaya. Kalau lebih bahaya.
So itulah maybe kan certain things inside the shampoo itself kan, or perhaps you have read yang macam sodium lauryl sulfate tu kan. Mungkin dalam lab it has been tested and it has adverse effects towards lab animals ke, yeah. So you have to think of it that way lah, yeah. So maknanya toxicity manifestation ni it can happen due to many factors, yeah. So but I'm not trying to scare you sampai macam tak ada quality of life lah. You takut semua benda exposure takut, penggunaan chemical takut sampai tak boleh nak guna household cleaning agents, tak kemas rumah sebab takut toxic. No, there are always like macam protection measures, so that is important lah, so that is something that you perhaps can think about, toxic exposure, okay. So I think hazard, you know about this word, this term, so meaning there can be potential harm, to people, to the property, to environment, so let's say I give you an example kan, kalau you masuk lab, you have hydrochloric acid on the bench dalam beaker, dalam jar ke betutup. So hazard is not there, so maknanya how it sits there on the bench, dia tak cause you any harm pun, but when it's spilled on the bench and then tangan you terkena pada the hydrochloric acid, then the spillage is like a hazard, can you follow that?
Yes.
So see, okay, so meaning nanti brothers and sisters, you sit down lah, so think about this, toxicity, hazard, so look up some definitions lah, and of course since we are talking about health risk assessment, so risk is simply talking about the probability of an adverse outcome, so there can be risk in anything that we do, any environment, so it's like the possibility lah, of something happening, so we really have to actually foresee the risk, that we can have. Let's say contoh dalam kilang papan kan, so kilang papan tu apa risk, the risk to the workers, for instance. Anyone can share with me ke macam mana kalau kilang papan, risk pada workers tu apa? Bukan, so maknanya respiratory problems, due to inhalation of the habuk kayu tu, so and dalam any kilang pun, there can be accidents, so meaning to say risk ni people kena study, so maknanya employers, if they open up a working area, so they have to actually identify the risk, so in OHS, occupational health and safety context, So maknanya there can be consequences, but of different severities lah, So think about this also. It's a good it's an interesting area to go in, So perhaps some of you lepas dah graduate nanti, you will like to work under environment, under NIOSH, under DOSH, okay, Kementerian environment, So think about this, So perhaps some of you will be inspectors or those who will be doing risk assessments, So I go on, Kalau terlampau cepat ke, kalau tak faham, you just chat with me so that I can explain ke apa, So these are like the other terms, to help you macam explain lah any scenarios ke, consequences ke, or perhaps about health risk assessments, So I think this one you can and try to understand lah. Okay, so we talking about consequence, likelihood, risk rating ni, So ni yang I cakap tadi, So maknanya kalau macam, let's say kalau banding kilang papan tadi dengan lab yang ada virus COVID ni, I don't know, So the risk is different, And then the risk of fatality, death is different, Mana lagi acute ke apa ke, So think about that, So okay, so let's talk about risk assessment, Risk assessment is actually kalau you buat risk assessment, is an analysis, a systematic analysis, characterization of anything that can be a risk to health. Okay, so that is why I wrote here, or perhaps I took the definition from somewhere, systematic scientific characterization of potential adverse health effects following exposure to hazardous agents or situations. Okay, so kat mana-mana pun akan ada ni. Dekat mana-mana occupational setting pun akan ada, even in our homes, So what becomes the scope of doing a risk assessment, So maknanya we or for you yang dah belajar toxicology ni, so you know the importance of actually identifying the toxic substance, kan, So meaning you characterize, you measure the quantities of the substance which could be toxic, in any particular setting. Boleh faham ke? Boleh, So you can chat with me. All right, thank you. So okay, so other things which are important is risk communication. So benda ni sangat penting kan. Bila management dah when they have identified the risk, they have to communicate this with employees, So meaning also bila people come in and do risk assessments, apa findings tu, they have to communicate with their own community, their employees, their pekerja, and also orang luar, So and to also reach out to external community, like yang inilah, those who make policies kan, So kan penting, let's say policy makers, Diorang yang macam make policy, tentukan what is the, for instance, the allowable exposure to certain things, to radiation coming from the occupation setting, So to perhaps what is the allowable exposure and what should be PPE for those working in agriculture and those yang kerjanya kiranya yang employ pesticide. Okay, so that is why risk communication is very important. Okay, so this is sort of like our fardu kifayah lah, So when we know that there are risks, so kita kena communicate. So semua orang macam berjaga-jaga, and we make policies semua ni untuk protect our ummah macam tu, So I hope you can understand, So talking about risk communication ni, so a lot of things macam anything that we don't understand kita macam takut lah, ya. So we fear, yeah. So we want to like reduce or allay the fear, yeah. So that's why there needs to be like communication, yeah. So we want to actually make the perceptions to be clear about it, yeah. So that's why dalam doing a health risk assessment, communicating the risk is very important. Okay, so try to actually I'll explain this further kejap lagi, ya. And of course the management of risk is very important as well. Yeah. So salah satu cara nak manage is to come up with policies. Yeah. And then of course come up with regulations. Yeah. So depending on the risk which has been characterized, which has been identified, how it will affect everyone from every sector. Yeah. So that is risk management. Yeah. And then yang ini risk perception. Okay. So I bagi contoh, ya. For instance, ya. I mean each and every one of us kan, ya, kita macam benda yang kita tak tahu kita takut lah, ya. So we are afraid of risk, ya, perhaps danger ke bahaya, ya. So I give you an example for the first criteria here, ya. So for instance, ya, or perhaps I can ask you also, which do you prefer, makan ubat klinik ke or go for natural product ke, macam herbal ke, herbal preparation untuk treat disease or conditions?
Makan ubat klinik.
Makan ubat klinik? Okay, bagus, ya. So, tapi kan macam a large population in the, a large group in the population, diorang macam, let's say, I think you all know pun, ada yang resort to macam pergi tok momo ke, ya, pergi makan herbal preparation saja to actually treat cancer even, ya. So simply because a large percentage of the population, anything yang natural ni kita pun, ya, kita anggap macam ada lower risk. Am I correct or am I wrong?
Betul.
What do you all think? Betul kan, ya? So kita macam menganggap yang anything natural tu okay, better than anything yang synthetic macam ubat klinik lah, ya, ubat medical. Okay, so but is that true? Is that true? I mean, pokok-pokok ni, plants ke apa ke, diorang tak ada toxic substance ke dalam tu? What do you all think? Ada kan, ya? So macam defense mechanisms in plants kan, ya, ada molecules yang toxic kan, ya. But anything natural, not necessarily they carry a lower risk, ya. So I will recommend that you read around this area, ya. So maknanya kalau anything yang originate from natural product ke apa ke, not necessarily dia tak bahaya, ya. So as opposed to macam contoh yang I bagi itulah ubat klinik dengan herbal preparations, ya. So think about this, ya. And then things like yang ini ada kriteria volition ni macam seseorang tu dia sukarela buat sesuatu. Let's say somebody tu let's say dia hisap rokok kan, dia hisap rokok voluntarily. So perhaps to his perception, the risk is low. Yeah. So do you get me? So maknanya we can give under this criteria contoh-contoh, ya, yang you can explain. You can give scenarios so that you can explain, ya. So I bagi contoh kat sini, kalau volition ni macam some things that people do because they think to them it does not have a higher risk, macam macam isap rokok tu for instance lah ya. So perhaps some of them feel tak sebahaya drive kereta. I don't know if you do. I don't know. Yeah. So things that they do voluntarily, meaning they perceive as to them tak tinggi sangat risk lah. So sort of like that is like the idea that I would like to pass on to you. Yeah. Boleh faham ke, students? Ada lagi ke contoh apart from yang I bagi contoh isap rokok ni under volition, things that people do voluntarily. Macam apa? Agaknya minum alkohol, kan? Yeah. So things like that. Okay. So perhaps to them the perception of risk is lower than any other activities. Let's see. Yeah. So itu contoh lah. Yeah. So and then also you can go down the list of criteria ni. Yeah. Kalau macam let's say manifestation of cancer, kan ya? I mean manifestation of the disease. Let's say kalau immediate, kalau you apa ni you are exposed to certain chemicals, suddenly naik rash kat tangan, ya. So you will think that that rash can be treatable, kan ya? Terus cari ubat alergi ke apa, lah ya. But kita lebih takut, ya. Kalau let's say or carcinogenic substance, ya. So the manifestation of kalau dalam which is usually delayed, so our perception, public perception is usually conditioned to higher risk. Susah nak treat. Allah. Okay. Okay, sorry. Boleh dengar saya kan sekarang?
Boleh.
Okay. Saya pula yang tak stable ya. So apologies for that. Okay, so I think I have to go very quickly lah ya. Alright, so saya repeat lah ya. So, where I left off. So hang on. Yes. Boleh nampak ke my screen?
Belum
Can you
lagi.
see my screen? Belum yet.
Not yet.
Teruk lah saya punya internet ni. Yeah. Okay. Do you have your own copy? Can you look into your own tablet?
Yeah. So can Prof.
Okay. I'll take you through. Okay. So let's look at page 8. So guna your own tablet. So you look at page 8. So kan tadi saya cakap pasal effect manifestation kan. So yang ini saya bercakap pasal manifestation of disease. So kalau let's say contoh manifestation of rash kan, you are exposed to certain chemicals and then naik rash kat tangan you. So something which is like that immediate, you feel that it has a lower risk, you can straight away eat allergic punya medication and you'll get rid of the rash perhaps. Or perhaps you boleh find lotion ke ointment ke. But I think kalau bercakap pasal manifestation of disease yang delayed, so ambil contoh cancer kan. So cancer can manifest like many years after exposure of the exposure to the carcinogenic substance, which we do not know pun bila. So dekat situ people are like much more worried lah. So they perceive like anything delayed in terms of manifestation ni. Dalam konteks ni saya bercakap tentang manifestation of disease kan, like cancer. So this is what the public perceives as carrying a higher risk. In any case pun we see that we kan macam cancer kan. Ada ubat cancer ke sekarang?
Tak ada.
Dah ada ke ubat kanser? Dah ada ke yang boleh cure cancer totally?
Tak ada.
Macam tak ada kan we still haven't found. Okay lah some of the anti-cancer drugs mungkin dia macam buat cancer tu go into remission. Macam dah cells cancer tu tak boleh didetect. So macam kadang-kadang you hear patients say that okay they are free of cancer, dia dah baik. Not necessarily sometimes. Mungkin because of the medical faculty is not able to detect the cancer cells, and the cancer is under remission. And you often hear kan kadang-kadang 2-3 tahun ke depan tiba-tiba meninggal orang tu. Have you heard stories like that? Or perhaps have experienced ada relatives ke? So I think you have heard of that. So think about this lah. So in terms of manifestation yang macam delayed ni, here lagi contoh penyakit. So the contoh there is cancer. So that's why people perceiving it as a higher risk. So other things macam severity, macam kalau accidents kan or perhaps Chernobyl explosion. Pernah dengar kan Chernobyl explosion ke? Nuclear reactor explosion, catastrophic kan. So of course people or the public perceives it as carrying a higher risk. macam yang biasa-biasa, not so severe, yeah, so accident biasa ke, so things like that. So I'm thinking that you can, this is a very interesting slide here. You can actually discuss with amongst yourselves, yeah. So macam things that you can control. Of course kita rasa kita are in control, we think of it, the situation as a having a lower risk, yeah. But what about things that we are unable to control, yeah? So we are especially, we foresee a higher risk, yeah. So sama juga dengan familiarity, yeah. And of course, in terms of like exposure, yeah. So that you are occasionally exposed ke, let's say you are not familiar with the situation ke, the substance ke, yeah. So anything yang kita tak tahu, kita takkan, usually we are much more afraid kan, yeah. So we perceive that perhaps the situation, the exposure could carry a higher risk, yeah. So other things ni boleh fikir apa, okay. Boleh ke brothers, sisters? This is a very interesting slide, yeah, on how kita public perceive risk. Yeah, so risk tu can come in many forms, yeah. But it can be identifiable, yeah. So any questions you want to ask me? Can you see my slide now?
Prof. Yes.
Yeah. Boleh, okay.
Yes.
Nak tanya apa-apa? Anything you want to share?
Apa contoh necessary and luxury tu?
Jom kita fikir macam mana necessary, luxury. I'm talking along the line of anything you are unfamiliar, kan ya? You tak tahu, macam you tak nak assess the situation, yeah? Anything that you have never been exposed to, yeah? So, anything which is luxury, I pun tak boleh nak fikir masa sekarang. Can we all think? Any of you? Berapa orang dah ada kat sini? 36. 36 of us, eh? What can be like contoh kat sini? And kita kaitkan dengan low ataupun high risk. I don't know, macam tak boleh nak fikir.
Makanan yang mahal?
Makanan mahal. Okay. Macam apa, delicacies kan? Yang luxury, macam let's say apa tu, macam sushi ni, I don't know, caviar, yes, I'm thinking along this also. Tapi macam it's macam caviar ni is a delicacy, a luxury, but of course how it affects health, how it has higher risk ni saya tak boleh nak fikir lah, Eva. But sometimes apa ni, kan ada macam Japanese punya sashimi ke sushi, kadang-kadang dia ambil daripada ikan yang the ikan yang buntal tu, yeah. So only licensed chef, Japanese chef yang tahu nak siang ikan tu and prepare the delicacy, which is a luxury actually, yeah. Because kalau tu salah preparation, because the other parts of the fish have toxins, yeah. So mati orang yang makan tu, yeah. Do you get me? Yeah. So read about it. So ada certain fish yang macam ada Japanese cuisine, yeah. Macam license chef yang boleh prepare. Kan dia orang selalu makan yang macam sashimi yang raw semua ni. But certain parts of that particular fish, I think toxin, yeah. So the parts yang bermakan tu is dietary, yeah. So suppose to something which is necessary, makan biasa, as opposed to that untuk yang bagi ni under luxury, perhaps it can be under luxury. So boleh kait lah ya dengan risk. Okay, brothers, sisters, yeah. So try to think of this lah ya. So it's to do with perception of risk. You tanya diri you sendiri, that you familiar with, yang you tak tahu, tak kenal, tak tahu jumpa ke. Kita macam a bit wary lah kan, ya. So worry, ya. So along those lines, ya. So ini bercakap tentang perceptions. So boleh ya. So can I move on? Students, boleh ya?
Yeah.
Alright. Okay, so
Yes.
perhaps the other slides yang ini, this is talking about acceptable risk. Saya nak tanya lah, acceptable risk kan? Acceptable risk. Oh, okay. Okay. Boleh dengar saya ya? Really bad lah.
Boleh.
Okay, semula nak kena cepat ni. Nak tanya apa, what can be acceptable risk? Can you think of something
Maybe
which can be
radioterapi.
maybe apa?
Chemoterapi.
Tak dengar Farah? Was that Farah just now?
Chemoterapi.
Chemotherapy, acceptable risk. Okay, kita take it down to a notch, benda yang lagi simple lah ya. Itu macam chemotherapy ni memang I think quite I mean the risk is so great also ya. So think about something simple macam benda-benda kat dapur yang you makan hari-hari. Gula, garam, ada risk tak agaknya?
Ada.
Ada.
Okay, so now you get me kan ya. So maknanya tapi why ada risk and then you still add sugar in your coffee? You still guna a lot of sugar in cakes when you're making cakes, let's say. You still letak garam dalam food. Kenapa?
Nanti tak sedap.
So maknanya itulah maknanya kita memanglah kita hidup hanya sekali kan macam tu ya. And we are also thinking about quality of life kan ya. So macam quality of life kan, macam siapa tadi cakap tak sedap So kalau kita guna garam tu, so we get the benefit lah, barulah sedap makan ya, benefits gained from the use of substance kan ya. Then of course maknanya ada adequate availability of garam, gula ya. So it's actually being used a lot in the public ya. So and also orang yang buat yang kerja in the production of sugar, salt, let's say. So kita provide them with employment. So this kalau benda-benda ni kita import out, export outside, it can give a good economy to the country. So there are considerations lah. So why we accept certain risk. So contoh yang I bagi ni memang paling senang lah. Garam, gula. So think of others lah yang macam ada kena mengena dengan point yang second last dengan last kali ni. So macam itu garam gula ni macam commodity, macam a substance kan ya. But you can also think about situations so anything lah human practices ke. So some of them are risks that we considered as acceptable. Yeah, and memang kita buat. Yeah. So memang kita, let's say garam gula tu kita guna. Yeah. So boleh faham ke? Can you at least follow? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So a lot of discussions can be can take off from here. Yeah. So talking about research actually. Okay. So okay. So now I'm going to go into the method. So I think selepas ni it's quite fast already. Yeah. So kalau nanti later you are let's say expected to do a risk assessment. So first and foremost, what you will do is to identify the hazard. Kita dah cakap kan tadi tentang hazard tadi. Yeah. So maknanya, let's say you work for NIOSH ke DOSH ke. So you are asked to do a risk assessment at a certain kilang facility. So you go there, you ambil samples ke apa ke, you balik lab you dekat your workplace, you do this assays. Yeah? Okay, so that comes under hazard identification lah ya, macam dose response relationships semua tu ya. And then macam ni lah you macam build up on that ya. So you characterize some more, you do the dose response assessment kalau naikkan dosage tu apa jadi ya. So you could be doing animal studies ya, you could be doing assessment using a lot of equipment ya. So meaning to say all the skills you should have under your belt lah ya before you graduate, and perhaps when you do your internship ke apa ke or industrial training ke ya. And of course it continues when you are in your workplace ya. Okay, so third is exposure assessment. Yeah, so maknanya here is actually looking at the exposure rate lah, yeah, and what would the effects be. Okay, so that is like a build up of the risk assessment that you do lah. Yeah, so you will have to consider things like this. Yeah, macam ni ya. So macam let's say ini macam exposure to the workers in that factory. So macam-macam contoh lah you can give. So sometimes in certain factories and depending on the nature of the work there, yeah, the exposure to the airborne particles ke, let's say to the employees are constant. Mungkin lah boleh cakap pasal A, yeah. Okay. But sometimes the exposure is different, yeah. So this also kena kaji, yeah, in the risk assessment that you do. Okay. So we have a lot of occupational settings kan ya, that can give toxic exposure to people in that setting, and in terms of the rate and frequency of exposure, giving you the patterns here is different, yeah. But it really depends on the nature lah, ya, of the work setting. Yeah. Anything you want to ask me kat sini? Boleh tangkap ke ni?
Boleh.
Yeah. Okay, so think about this. So this is also something that you will be doing in your risk assessment. Yeah. So last but not least is actually looking at the risk itself. Yeah. The characterization of the risk. Yeah. So depending on what has been identified earlier. Yeah. So this will be things that you will go through lah, yeah. So you will also consider again, yeah, you punya assessment tu valid ke or reliable ke tidak, yeah. So that is very important lah. I think you will take macam your knowledge in pharmacology, in toxicology, yeah. So guna semua tu untuk do this job, yeah, this risk assessment job. Okay, so itu saja, meaning the 4 steps lah, or perhaps the gist, the contents of risk assessment. So basically, you look at hazard, identify, you buat dose response kan ya. Kan kita buat health risk, usually for us is health risk assessment lah ya. Dan tengok exposure, tengok pattern of exposure, semua tu you kena relate dengan your findings nanti. And of course, looking at the risk itself, yeah. So you have to characterize, identify, and all that. Yeah? Okay, so yang ini rasanya macam covers everything that we talked from the very beginning just now. Yeah. So maknanya include yang tadi kan I ada cakap yang about risk management. Yeah. Okay, so following what we do in risk assessment ni, so maknanya the employer dia kena manage lah ya. Mana yang macam high risk tu dia kena macam straight away take out from the environment ke occupational setting. Yeah. And perhaps yang selainnya they can substitute ke use alternative equipment ke to lower the risk ke ya. So put in HEPA filter ke ya. So jaga dia punya employees ya. So there are control options ya, and then put down policies ke, so it comes under legal considerations ya. So semua ni macam kerja-kerja risk management. Okay, so and of course other things like they have got, kalau macam employer ni mestilah dia, kalau employer kat kilang kan, dia mestilah kena fikir kalau dia nak bring in HEPA filter, nak kena guna duit, funds nak dapat mana ya. But at the same time dia ada obligation to actually take care of dia punya employees ya. So a lot of things that they have to consider, so that comes under risk management. Boleh faham ke, brothers and sisters?
Boleh.
Yes.
Okay, very good. So here is another type of paradigm lah ya. So kat sini masuk sekali dengan what we talked about just now. Itu that is risk communication. Ya. So maknanya ada kerjasama lah ya, cooperation with people outside the public ya. Okay, and then of course considering other factors lah. Okay, so you can go through that I think lah. So ini something else lah ya. Okay, well yeah, so meaning why risk assessment ni is very important actually. Yeah? Even any sort of institution kat UIE tu pun ada risk assessment. Yeah. So something that has to be considered. Yeah. Wherever lah, yeah, especially in occupational setting. Yeah. So I give to you macam some more definitions. Yeah, risk apa dia, hazards. So now you know, yeah, risk is actually hazard times the exposure. Okay, let's say exposure ni sikit saja, so risk tu rendah ke tinggi? What do you all think? Sebab risk is hazard kali dengan exposure. Just now we talk about exposure kan. So kalau exposure tu macam tak banyak kali, so what can you say about the risk? Anyone?
Low.
Low lah. You see? So ini macam rule of thumb. Yeah. Okay. So I think you can make sense of that lah. Yeah. So I think the rest ni you can go through lah. Hazards ni banyak ya. Do you know about all these terms? Ergonomic ni tahu kan? Ergonomic.
Tak sure.
Ergonomic ni macam let's say kan saya pensyarah kan. Pensyarah ni apa kerja dia?
Teacher.
Belajar.
Dia pengajar lagi, dia duduk depan apa? Banyak duduk depan komputer kan? Duduk kan?
Ya,
Buat
betul.
kerja, tulis paper lah, publish lah. Tapi kalau let's say dia punya posture tu not supported by the chair that he or she is sitting, so you see it can have adverse health effects. Betul ke tak betul ni?
Betul.
See ya. Okay, and then let's say my staff kan, yang admin staff ke, yang clinical staff, diorang angkat-angkat barang ke apa ke, so ada advice ke on anything ergonomic ke apa ke ya. So let's say kalau even duduk lama ni, the advice is to actually after 40 minutes ke half an hour, kita kena berjalan ya. So things like that, yeah, because the risk is there towards health, usually, yeah. So think about this lah, yeah. So I have put you can go through the types of hazards, yeah, because it definitely kait dengan risk, yeah. Kan tadi risk equals to hazard times exposure kan, yeah. So when you consider risk also, risk ada macam-macam, yeah? And then also how harm can likely occur. Different situations, different likelihood of harm, yeah? And then severity pun different, yeah? Then of course what we aim for is to reduce the risk, yeah? And then kalau boleh, we remove the hazard lah. Macam tadi I cakap pasal hydrochloric acid, why is it on the bench? Yeah? It should be like kept by your lab people in cabinets ke, so that there is no risk of spillage. Yeah, so then we can eliminate risk. Yeah, so things like that. Okay, so yang seterusnya is actually the steps of risk assessment lah. So berkait dengan what we talked about previously also. Yeah, so more of management, yeah. So yang ini macam the details lah, yeah. So I think this one you can go through yourself, yeah. So the details of what to do when you're doing a risk assessment. Okay. So macam ni identify hazard kan. Okay. Right, ini sambungannya, yeah. Okay, so what you can do, of course, when you do your risk assessment, you have to be speaking to people at that particular work setting ke, at that kilang yang you dipanggil tu ke, tengok documentation dia, apa protective measures yang dia ada, ya, apa policies yang dia ada, how dia actually protect dia punya workers, ya. So you do inspections, ya, and then you identify risk, okay. So and of course identify what controls there can be, yeah. So see here the things that we talked about, and of course you can macam reread the risk, yeah. After in consideration after controls have been taken ke, yeah. So ada yang high, low ke risk, yeah. And of course, you have to actually look at what can be the emergency procedures there, yeah? Is it in place or not, yeah? Or perhaps even yang fire extinguisher to dah expire, things like that, yeah? And risk controls are very important. This you need to be talking to the employers, yeah? And putting down legislation, policies, regulations are very important as well, yeah? And of course, there is that need to record, yeah? And authorize recommendation that you do to the supervisor at the place, yeah. And of course, your findings to make it effective, to make it have impact, you have to discuss with the company, yeah. So how nanti the company will actually communicate the risk, yeah, to everyone, yeah, not only people dalam yang dalaman but outside, yeah. So inilah ya acknowledgement of understanding. So you see tadi ada macam element of risk communication that we discussed previously. And of course the rest are like to monitor lah so the risk control and all that. Okay. So when is it required? I think it's usually macam it's recommended to be done regularly lah. A few years, yeah. Very important for places yang high risk, yeah. So I think you can think of places or occupational settings yang high risk kan, yeah. So dekat mana-mana yang anything can meletup ke, yeah. So you can think of that. So kat situ lah lagi frequent risk assessment needs to be, yeah. So who should write a risk assessment? Of course, that helps people like you, yeah, who has some knowledge, yeah, in biomedical ke, toxico, pharmaco, yeah, and you go and work in agencies yang macam I cakap tadi, yeah, the OSH aspect, yeah. Okay, so boleh, so I hope you can follow me. So any questions? Brothers, sisters, anything?
No.
Boleh follow, ya?
Boleh.
Boleh, ya? Okay, very good. Okay, so Basically that is it. Hang on. Tapi ada lagi satu. This one I add. Sekejap, hang on. Can you all see in your Padlet? Ada satu macam I letak risk space axis diagram. Nampak tak dekat Padlet you? Nampak ya? Okay. Pada I punya screen ni pun I think you can see. Macam mana nak besarkan ni ya? I pun tahu lah. Sekejap hang on. Okay. Nanti you look through this risk space apa tu? Mana I open je lah. So can you see it in my screen now? Boleh nampak ya?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Let us like look through ya. Oh, macam mana nak bila besarkan ni dia ni. Okay. Oh, okay. I boleh tarik. Okay. Okay, nampak ke sekarang?
Nampak?
Nampak ya? Okay. So ini is actually a risk space axis diagram. So it's very interesting, yeah, because you can see the four corners there, the four apa ni macam categories there, yeah. So here are like the items yang carry risk, yeah. So interesting kan macam ya, satellite crashes, yeah, exposure to mercury, asbestos, macam tu, yeah. And then ni macam just as simple as taking aspirin, yeah. Or here vaccine. So this is, so ambil contoh vaksin, yeah. Okay, so vaksin ni dia duduk dalam quadrant yang controllable. So I nak tanya you, why is it controllable vaccines ni? Siapa je exposed to vaccine? Do you get exposed to vaccine unnecessarily? Tiba-tiba tercocok je. Tak kan? So maknanya ada consent kan also for you to be vaccinated kan. So it's something yang controllable lah. So you do not dread this, yeah. So it's not like macam the other end here whereby it's catastrophic. Exposure kepada you tu you tak boleh control, yeah. But vaccine is different, yeah. Tapi it is also sitting in a quadrant whereby dia punya risk or due to the exposure to the vaccine kita tak berapa nak tahulah, ya. Mungkin not as much as microwave oven punya microwave, the waves, the wavelengths, the vaccine ni mungkin kita tahu jugalah ya, from the research or perhaps findings from the companies that makes the vaccine, okay. So that's why it sits here in the controllable and also not observable punya quadrant. Boleh faham ke? Boleh ya?
Boleh.
Okay, kita ambil yang senang lah macam ni. Okay, apa benda? Which one will you want to look at so that we can I boleh explain ke? Hang on. Bicycles. Naik basikal ada risk tak? Sini.
Ada.
Jatuh terpungging. I dah lama tak naik basikal. Dah 20 tahun kan tak bawa basikal. Tak tahu ingat ke tak lagi. Ya. Yeah?
Bawa motor je sekarang.
Bawa motor je sekarang ya. Tapi ialah basikal sama lah macam motor kan. Tapi kenapa dia duduk dalam quadrant ni? Control kan, you boleh control kan. It's either you want to bawa basikal or not, or bawa motor ke tak kan ya. So it's voluntary lah, voluntary. And then kalau jatuh basikal ke jatuh motorcycle tu straight away you boleh observe the risk, the health effects, the health risk luka. So benda-benda macam tu. As easy as that to explain. Yeah. So that is this quadrant. Let's say we take something from this quadrant. Macam mana kita nak explain yang ini? Yang ni, ni nuclear weapon fallout. Ini yang kita dread ni, yang kita fear, yang kita takut. Because kita tak tahu how it will affect our health, kan ya? So the consequences too could be fatal, ya. So the exposure also kita tak boleh nak stop it because it's beyond our control, kan? If we were to be in the area of the nuclear weapon fallout ke or nuclear reactor explosion ke, ya, here nuclear reactor accidents. And then of course the risk, so you do not know, kan? And sometimes people, when you read about these things, 10 years forward, barulah a lot of people yang exposed to dapat cancer, ramai yang mati from cancer. The effects can be delayed. Yeah. So that is why these things sit in this quadrant. Yeah. So along with pesticides, yeah. So that sort of thing. Yeah. So it's very interesting. So you really have to be able to actually explain this. Yeah. So let's look at this quadrant pula, ya. Yang carbon monoxide ni, or perhaps parachute ke, yeah, okay. So I think you can make sense of this, yeah. So some of the risks, some of the consequences, actually straight away observable lah, yeah. Tapi still dia masuk dalam quadrant ni because it's something that perhaps kita nak kata kita boleh control ke or kita boleh tahan daripada being exposed to that risk, ya. Sometimes it's out of our control, ya. So nerve gas accidents, ya. Railroad, ni LRT hari tu, railroad collisions. Macam mana kita nak control, kan? Ya. Have you heard about LRT punya incident tu hari tu?
Yeah.
Yes, ya. So see,
Yes.
yeah. So it says in this quadrant, ya. Of course lah, macam tak adalah macam hujung ni, ya, sebab sebenarnya the management boleh control ni, ya. So training, but still it's still under uncontrollable lah. Accident kan, macam mana? So but the risk, the consequences is observable, ya. Maknanya orang luka, apa hari tu berdarah-darah. I think you've seen pictures as well, kan? Yeah. So that is how we actually address or look at this risk-based axis diagram lah, yeah. So it responds or correspond roughly to hazard perceived and dreadedness ni macam kita punya fear, kita takut benda-benda yang kita beyond our control, kan, yeah. So things like that, yeah. So it's a very interesting type of things or perhaps looking at risk lah, way of looking at risk. Okay, so I think I'm basically done with toxicology lah, ya, teaching you toxicology in a formal session, ya. So ada apa-apa ke lagi nak tanya saya? Boleh follow ke our class, our items just now, learning items just now, boleh, ya?
Boleh.
Boleh.
Alright, so discuss lah, ya. So these things macam excite me, macam a lot of learning can be done, ya. So a lot of things that we can discuss, ya, because kita ada obligation to actually take care of health, kan, ya, for the ummah, kan, ya, for the community, kan, ya. So when you learn or read around the area, you become much more knowledgeable, yeah. So you are able to actually be of benefit to your community, yeah. So don't ever forget this, yeah, because when you go out there, be at a place whereby you can contribute the most, yeah. So insyaAllah pahala semua tu akan ada, yeah. So that is always my pesanan lah, ya, pada semua students sebenarnya, especially us, ya, in the health science fields. We are at a place whereby we can benefit all other people, yeah. So make sure you don't forget that, yeah. Okay, so kalau tak ada apa-apa, or perhaps if you have any questions pun, ya, you can always contact me in Telegram boleh, dalam Padlet pun boleh, yes. When you are reviewing or revising pun, you can always go into Padlet, and ask me, in the comment section. I will attend to it lah, insyaAllah, yeah. So, okay, brothers, sisters, so I hope you have learned something today, yeah. And then good luck lah, your I think exam is on the 24th, ke? Your bukan exam, assessment. Final assessment. Betul kan?
Yes,
24th,
24th.
okay, morning kan? Yeah, so be ready lah, yeah. But of course I'll be in contact lah, yeah, with you all. So okay, so I think we can end with tasbih kafarah and surah. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, so well done. Yeah, so we have completed the toxic course. Yeah, so all the best. Yeah, so anything you need, you can direct contact me lah. So terima kasih ya semua. Assalamualaikum.
Terima kasih, Doktor.
Okay, Doktor.
Bye bye. Take care. Okay, be safe. Yeah. Alright.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay, bye.
Thank you,
Assalamualaikum.
Prof.